plot. Really annoying to sometimes create in a sense of just making it. Plot is one of those things that it makes or breaks your story, as every other element does, of course, but if you do not have good plot, you don't have a story. If you have no plot, you really don't have a story. And so we're going to be going over basically things not to do while making plot. My name is Ryan, the author, and this is Path in the Pen. So basically, one of the first things that's super important for, plot structure and all that is whenever you're laying out your exposition. I get that this could be considered sentence structure, prose, all that, but realistically speaking, whenever you go through exposition, you're not going to go paragraphs onto paragraphs. Your reader should not know your entire world until some point in the story that you pick out, but it's not in the, let's say, the first few chapters. They're not going to figure out your entire story. They're not going to figure out all these depths of your characters, because if they already figure everything out and you have a story, which I'll touch back on, a story that just is predictable, no one's going to like that. No one really does, so I wouldn't recommend doing that. But back on the subject of exposition, just add little sequences of things that the character that, for example, in fantasy, one of our characters go over, maybe like your magic system, let's say that, okay, or the certain events that made them who they are. You have to figure out the feeling that would be most realistic to them and be honest with yourself, and knowing that if that's the feeling that you're really getting from them, that if that's the actual feeling that they would be feeling, then you can go with it. But you don't over-explain. Well, you can over-explain if it's that character that overthinks. But don't make your character overthinking just so you can get more exposition. The reader's going to hate that. Because I've come across, as a reader myself, books that over-explain and I end up skimming over it. Don't really pay attention that much to it. But exposition, just make sure that everything that you're doing is in your ability to make the character sound like who they are, in whether you do first person, third person limited, or third person omniscient. It's a hard process to figure out, but once you figure out your characters or your narrator sometimes and how they take the story, then you'll figure out how to lay out exposition in a way that isn't too unsettling to the fact that people hate it. Next, we're going to go with plot. With what I feel like a story kind of goes is most people get rising action. This is the normal thing. You start at exposition and then you rise to rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, all that. I think I missed one or two, but basically with rising action, I feel like in your story nowadays in modern times, it has to be a bit hilly. So while you're going up that slope, make it go down a bit. Get them a bit down to earth for those little break periods. It can just be a little dip, but your story needs to slowly go to that climax like it's a rolling hill. And what I mean by rolling hill is that there's a little hill and then goes down a little bit, just slightly, a bit of a dip. Keep on doing that repeatedly until you reach that top of the mountain. And if you do that, then you'll see that it won't really be more so of straight to the point. There will be more realistic things to it, because in a story, most of us are doing other things other than trying to, get to that goal, because there are other things that shape our life, and most of the rising action and stuff like that, or that whole entire thing in general, they're just reaching to a new height of trying to get to that climax point as the story goes on. But there's obviously going to be stuff happening, so I wouldn't time skip it. After the first chapter, like let's say a year later, and then the climax going bad, all that, right? You want to build your characters so they get more development, and you see how they develop before the climax, so then they can take the rising action and I suppose the falling action, connect them, see how the climax changed them as a person. So yeah, I would recommend just not going full in on, don't make your stuff seem like side quest. It doesn't need to seem like it branches off from the entire thing. It should still have a reason, but keep in those human things. So little dinners. You'll have little dinners, right? Little lunches, brunches, breakfast, etc. You'll have late nights, etc. You have to put in a realistic scenario in your world, whether it's Earth or some other branch off of Earth. Like my story, I have an entirely new world. So you have to make sure that that's something that they do in their culture, in a sense, and being able to put those culture things in a sense of being able to put that, and that the culture allows that. That's how world building and plot kind of intertwine a bit, is because world building stuff defines your plot, right? World building stuff can define these things that are the rising action and or sometimes the falling action, and even the climax. So the culture, maybe the culture of your civilization, that in your main character, unless they're rogue, they, let's for example, they're really stubborn. So whenever war comes knocking, they're not going to say and try doing a treaty with people who are reasonable. They're going to say, they're going to get hit in the feelings and say, I need to, instead go and branch out and go, let's go to war. Yeah, let's go to war. We're going to wreck you, right? Is that what the culture is? Or is your culture full of people who don't listen? And basically see how the society of the civilization that you're in shapes your characters into who they are today. Do they reject it? Do they fit in? Or do they want the society to be even better, in a sense? In a sense of that it's already good, but it can be better, and they want to make it better. That's how you can create character depth even more. And yeah, you see how all these little things intertwine a bit, that sometimes you can't talk about plot without your world. You can't talk without plot without your world building, without your characters, about the whole entire thing, because your plot is all these things, right? But plot for let's go on to the climax. Climax of the story is normally whenever, you have the big battle. You have multiple climaxes in a story. Just so, especially nowadays with people's retention on all of this, even readers, they're going to get bored. So if your rising action things aren't, too exciting, thrilling, then you can just throw a bit of a mini climax that looks like the top, and then you realize there's another mountain to go down and rise through, or maybe the mountain's connected, right? You just do that so your characters are more, they're used to the final, but then how do you make that final climax if you have the really big climax of the story, the real pinnacle of your story? How is it going to be unlike the other climaxes? Because most, for at least in action, fantasy stuff, it's going to be like a big battle. It isn't really going to be more so on the effect of, let's just say, it's mostly dragon. It's like, okay, let's go fight a dragon. Let's go fight in the final battle of the Empire and just try, winning the war. How is it unlike any battle? What goes wrong? Because every single battle plan that your character will create, if they are a soldier, if maybe they're a foot soldier, and they see the inconsistencies of their leader's battle plan, right? So they make their own battle plan for their little platoon that they have, which is like 6-7 men, let's say that, okay, depending on your population of your world. So then they do a new battle plan, but then their battle plan also has flaws. So whenever people are trusting them and are giving more trust to your main character, who is just a foot soldier with their own platoon, that whenever you give them that red herring effect of sort of that the battle is going to be fine because you found out the inconsistencies, but no one's perfect, right? We're going to find out that there is that the enemy has foreseen this in a sense and overcorrected it and now you're stuck in everything's going not according to plan. And you want that in your story, because nothing ever goes to plan in a story. And what I mean by that is, of course, you have your plot, you have what you want to do with the story, but you should have stuff that isn't really what people are expecting, in a sense. And I don't mean weird expecting, like, let's just say, like, halfway through the book, there's a treaty. All the conflict that you build up through the book has just dissipated. But is it so you can have a sort of, let's say another nation comes in and, they're doing a treaty so then they can go against this even more powerful nation. And basically for the rest of your book, you're going at that 90% mark of your book, and the last 10% just all battles, and it's like the big battle that may starts the war, or is the starting and end of the war for just one battle, just one big battle, or maybe it's multiple battles, and you just see where you go from there. You gotta trust your gut, I think, on this one. Trust what you think is going to be best for your story and the themes and all that you're trying to create and integrate into the plot. And that's the next subject, is integrating themes into plot. Go and I'd say just make sure you have characters that really do, pry on that theme, whatever you're going through. So there are many themes that I have in my book, right? But most of the time I'll remake themes, it's going to be a question. And we'll see on my next video, 10 questions you should ask yourself when making a theme, which is going to be sometime this week. I don't know. It's going to be rough. But you're just going to be going through there, how to integrate your theme into your plot. And normally it's through characters and world building and integrating into a society. We get more into society and culture, that your themes could represent the question that you're basically asking your audience, your readers, what should be happening, for example. And boom, your culture or society actually shows and asks that question throughout the book. Very sparingly. No one's saying outright exactly what the question for your theme is. You may have one line that, for example, I think I have like one piece of dialogue that really harps on it, but it's very skip over through. But whenever you get that just one piece of dialogue, you might see that your reader actually starts connecting what the themes are in your book if they're not as much obvious. So giving those hints and stuff definitely help. And plot's very difficult to do because there's so many genres: mystery, fantasy, fantasy mystery, fantasy romance. It's annoying. I do not like really dealing with all these subgenres, and it's so crazy. I'll talk a bit about mystery now, is, getting those red herring effects. Maybe your entire story just for the beginning, like mine, is a mystery, but the mystery is still like 25% through the book. It's just there to keep the reader engaged and to keep them in a sense of waiting for when the big reveal is going to happen, and there's no clues that are happening. It's just, at least in my book, people are just dying. And we get to see that not everything going to have fingerprints, or at least in your society, maybe there isn't enough technology to figure out what fingerprints, or maybe your magic, if it's a mystery fantasy, for example, the magic is seeing, tracks and seeing stuff like that. Just get these ideas, your world building, characters, all integrate into your plot eventually, themes, etc. You get what I mean. Every single thing is just feeding into your plot, and so plot is a very important aspect. And after we go over more videos on what did I do world building last time, so next time it's going to be characters, probably next episode. And then after characters, we're going to be just going through more stuff, so probably just a dedicated episode on themes, even after the 10 question theme video that's still releasing later this week. Self-plugging, I hate I'm sorry. But basically just make sure that your plot is exactly how you want it to be, and it conveys the message, but also that your world-building characters and all these things are just mixing up in one stirring pot. And make sure to keep on stirring, because if you stop, then you're going to let the food that's in there, your characters, everything that makes your plot, it's going to settle, and everything's going to disperse out. And if it's not at the right timing, then you're going to have a different story than what you're expecting, and you're going to have different elements that you weren't really liking. And that's my take on it. I'm not the smartest man in the room. I will never claim to be. There are many greats, many people that have better advice. Go check them out. My name is Ryan, the author, and this is Path to the Pen. Thank you very much.